The October wind swept through Willow Creek, Nebraska, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and diesel from the highway just beyond the town's edge. Main Street, with its faded brick storefronts and flickering neon signs, was the heart of this small Midwest community, where life moved slow and secrets lingered in the spaces between conversations. On this crisp morning in 2025, an 82-year-old man named Henry Callahan shuffled along the cracked sidewalk, his worn leather boots scuffing the pavement. His denim jacket, patched at the elbows and frayed at the cuffs, bore the faint outline of a name tag: H. Callahan. A retired Marine, Henry carried the weight of 3 Vietnam tours, 2 Purple Hearts, and a limp that spoke of sacrifices he rarely mentioned. He wasn't one for attention. All he wanted was a quiet corner booth at Millie's Diner, a black coffee, and the morning paper to read about a world that felt both distant and familiar. In his left hand, Henry clutched a small grocery bag from Harper's Market, 2 apples, a loaf of rye bread, and a birthday card for his granddaughter, Emily, who was in her 2nd year at West Point. The card had a picture of a soaring eagle, and Henry had spent 10 minutes at the store choosing it, imagining Emily's smile when she opened it. His right hand gripped a cane, its rubber tip worn from years of steadying his steps. The cold bit at his knuckles, but he didn't complain. He'd faced worse in the jungles of Vietnam, where rain soaked through boots and silence meant danger. Across the street, a group of young men loitered outside Cloud9 Vape Shop, their laughter sharp and jagged against the autumn quiet. Chrome rims glinted on their modified cars, a black Mustang, a red Charger, a silver Civic, parked at angles that claimed the curb as their own. Their voices carried, bragging about horsepower and weekend plans, their hoodies emblazoned with skulls and slogans. Henry barely noticed them. Noise didn't faze him. He'd heard mortars scream louder than any car stereo. As he passed the Mustang, his jacket brushed the side mirror. It wobbled slightly, a soft clink of metal, but stayed upright. Henry stopped, turned, and raised a hand, his voice steady but warm. "Didn't mean to bump it, kid," he said, offering a faint smile. "These old shoulders don't move like they used to." The tallest of the group, a 20-something named Travis Decker, stepped forward. His hoodie bore a faded skull, and his eyes burned with something restless. Anger, maybe, or a hunger for control. He didn't check the car. He didn't ask questions. "Watch where you're going, Grandpa," he snapped, his voice dripping with disdain. Before Henry could respond, Travis shoved him, hard. The old man stumbled, his cane clattering to the pavement, the grocery bag splitting open. Apples rolled into the gutter, the rye bread landed in a puddle, and the birthday card fluttered under a tire. A sharp crack followed as Travis's open hand met Henry's cheek. The sound echoed off the brick walls, cutting through the morning air like a gunshot. Henry hit the ground with a muffled groan, his palms scraping the asphalt. His glasses slipped down his nose, one lens smudged with dirt. The laughter from the vape shop didn't stop. A couple walking their dog quickened their pace, eyes averted. A barista inside the coffee shop glanced out, her hands pausing on the espresso machine, then turned back to her work. Travis smirked, already strutting back to his friends. "Old man shouldn't be out here messing with my ride," he said, lighting a vape pen. His friends chuckled, their voices a chorus of indifference. Henry didn't cry out. He sat up slowly, his face flushed with more shame than pain, and began gathering the scattered apples. One was bruised, another smeared with grit, but he placed them carefully back into the torn bag, as if they still mattered. The birthday card was crumpled, its eagle now streaked with mud. He smoothed it gently, his fingers trembling, and tucked it into his jacket. His cheek stung, a warm pulse under his skin, but he didn't touch it. His cane lay a few feet away, half hidden under a parked car. He reached for it, wincing not from the fall, but from the weight of being invisible in a town he'd called home for 4 decades. In 1969, Henry had carried a wounded corporal 3 miles through a monsoon to a medevac chopper, bullets tearing through the trees around him. He'd been 26, fearless, his body strong and certain. Now, in 2025, he couldn't get a stranger to hand him a napkin for the blood trickling from his lip. A teenager on a scooter zipped by, earbuds in, oblivious to the old man's raised hand. A woman pushing a stroller crossed the street to avoid the scene. Henry wasn't seeking pity. He was searching for proof he still existed, that the man who'd once stood tall under fire hadn't faded into the background of Willow Creek. Inside the vape shop, Travis leaned against the counter, blowing clouds of vapor and bragging. "Dude walked right into my car. Had to teach him a lesson." His friends nodded, one scrolling through his phone, another sipping an energy drink. The air felt heavier now, but they ignored it, their laughter a shield against the unease creeping in. Outside, Henry adjusted his jacket, wiped his lip with the corner of his sleeve, and pulled a battered flip phone from his pocket. The screen was cracked, the buttons worn, but it worked. One contact stood out. Falcon 3, emergency. He pressed it, leaned back on a nearby bench, and waited, his breath steady despite the ache in his chest. Henry sat still, his posture straight despite the pain in his knees. He didn't look angry or scared, just patient, like a man who'd waited out storms before. His mind drifted briefly to a memory from Vietnam, a night in the jungle, his platoon huddled under a tarp, sharing a single cigarette while rain pounded the earth. He'd been the one to keep them calm, to remind them the dawn would come. Now, he waited for a different kind of dawn. 20 minutes passed. The street hummed with its usual rhythm, cars rolling by, a delivery truck idling at the light, the faint jingle of a bell as someone entered the diner. Then it started. A low rumble, faint at first, vibrating through the pavement. A few pedestrians glanced around, confused. A shopkeeper stepped outside, wiping his hands on an apron. The sound grew, a deep rhythmic pulse that rattled windows and made coffee cups tremble on diner tables. "That's no semi-truck," a man muttered, squinting at the horizon. From the gray sky, a dark shape emerged, a CH-53C Stallion helicopter, its massive rotors slicing the air, its silhouette unmistakable against the clouds. It roared low over Willow Creek, kicking up leaves and dust as it descended into an empty lot behind the hardware store, where old tires and rusted farm equipment lay scattered. Seconds later, 2 black SUVs screeched to a halt outside the vape shop, their tires smoking on the asphalt. Doors flew open, and a dozen figures in tactical gear spilled out, moving with the precision of a well-rehearsed symphony. No one shouted. No one needed to. Their boots hit the pavement in unison, their eyes scanning the street like hawks. A man stepped from the helicopter, his presence commanding. He was in his late 40s, broad-shouldered, with a jaw set like granite and eyes that cut through the chaos. His Marine Corps patch gleamed on his shoulder, and his name tag read, Callahan. Colonel James Callahan, Marine Special Operations Command. He strode toward the bench where Henry sat, his boots steady, his face a mix of resolve and something softer. Grief, perhaps, or guilt for not being there sooner. Henry looked up, his weathered face softening, and nodded once. James knelt, his voice low. "Dad," he said, brushing a speck of dirt from Henry's jacket. "I'm here. I got you." Travis, still leaning against his Mustang, froze. His vape pen hung limp in his hand, the smirk wiped clean from his face. His friends backed away, their bravado dissolving like mist. They saw the patch, the team, the helicopter still idling in the lot. This wasn't just any old man. This was Colonel Callahan's father, a Marine who'd seen wars they couldn't imagine. The street fell silent, the only sound the faint hum of the Sea Stallion's rotors. James stood, his gaze locking onto Travis. He didn't raise his voice. "Who put hands on a veteran?" No one spoke. Travis shifted, raising his hand slightly, his voice cracking. "It was just a bump, man. He hit my car." James didn't flinch. "That man carried soldiers out of hell while you were still in diapers." A murmur rippled through the gathering crowd. A woman recording on her phone whispered, "Oh, damn." Travis scoffed, clinging to defiance. "You can't just roll in here like you own the place." James took one step forward. Just one. It was enough to erase the distance between patience and consequence. "I'm not here to threaten you," he said, his voice calm but heavy, like a storm gathering on the horizon. "I'm here because my father bled on this street while people watched." He nodded to one of his team, a lean sergeant with a radio clipped to his vest. The sergeant spoke into it, his words clipped and precise. Minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up, its lights off but its presence purposeful. Two officers stepped out, their faces serious, not the bored expressions of routine calls. James pointed at Travis. The cuffs clicked shut, not with anger, but with quiet finality. Travis didn't resist. His confidence crumbled like dry leaves, his shoulders slumping as the officers led him to the cruiser. His friends stood silent, their eyes darting between the helicopter and the old man on the bench. As the cruiser drove off, the street seemed to exhale. People emerged from shops, hesitant at first, their footsteps soft on the pavement. Henry remained on the bench, his hands resting on his cane, his expression unreadable. His glasses were still smudged, but he didn't bother to clean them. He watched the crowd, not with anger, but with a quiet curiosity, as if wondering what they'd do next. James crouched beside him, his voice softer now. "You good, Dad?" Henry nodded, a faint smile breaking through. "Had worse. Just didn't expect it here, in my own town." A woman in a knit sweater stepped forward, clutching a clean cloth napkin from the diner. Her name was Clara, a retired schoolteacher who'd known Henry for years, but never spoken to him beyond a nod. "I should have done something," she said, her eyes down, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry, Henry." He took the napkin gently, his fingers brushing hers, and nodded. "It's all right, Clara. Takes a moment to find your courage." That small act broke the dam. A man in a trucker hat removed his cap, holding it over his heart. A young woman with a stroller whispered to her toddler, who waved shyly at Henry. A teenage boy, still clutching his skateboard, stood straighter, mimicking a salute he'd seen in war movies. The crowd shifted, phones lowered, hands extended. No cheers, no spectacle, just respect, heavy and overdue. A retired Navy chief, his hair gray and his posture still rigid, stepped forward and stood at attention. A former Army medic, her hands scarred from years of service, joined him. Soon, a small line of veterans formed along the sidewalk, shoulder to shoulder, their silence louder than any speech. James stepped back, letting the moment unfold. His team stood watch, their presence a quiet shield, their rifles slung low, but their eyes sharp. Henry sat taller, not from pride, but from relief, as if a weight he'd carried for decades, through jungles, through hospitals, through years of being overlooked, had finally lifted. Henry's mind drifted again, this time to a hospital bed in 1971, where he'd woken to find his left leg shattered and his best friend's dog tags in his hand. He'd promised to live for both of them, to carry their story forward. Now, as he looked at the line of veterans, he felt that promise fulfilled, not in medals or speeches, but in this quiet moment of recognition. Clara, the schoolteacher, stayed nearby, her napkin now folded in her pocket. She spoke softly, almost to herself. "We forgot how to see people like you, Henry. That's on us." He shook his head. "You're seeing me now. That's enough." By nightfall, the video was everywhere. Someone, maybe the woman with the phone, had uploaded it to YouTube, raw and unedited. The shove, the silence, the helicopter's roar, the arrest. Hashtag spread like wildfire. # honor the unseen. # Henry Callahan. # respect the veteran. Local news ran the story, their anchors stumbling over Henry's name at first, but quickly learning his history. National outlets picked it up by morning, their headlines bold. Marine veteran attacked. Son's response shocks town. They didn't just report the incident. They told Henry's story. 3 tours in Vietnam, a Silver Star for dragging a wounded squad to safety, a life of quiet service in a town that had stopped noticing him. The vape shop posted a vague apology on social media, claiming the incident didn't reflect their values. But the internet remembered the laughter, the turned backs, the indifference. Comments flooded in, unforgiving. You laughed while he bled. The mayor, a wiry man named Tom Ellison, reached out to James, his voice nervous over the phone. "We'd like to honor your father, Colonel. A community event. Something to make this right." James's response was firm. "No cameras, no politics. Make it about him, not you." Tom agreed, and a week later, the town square was transformed. A small stage stood under an oak tree, its leaves a blaze of red and gold. A high school band practiced Sweet Caroline, their notes uneven but earnest. Rows of folding chairs filled with neighbors, some who'd known Henry for years, others who'd only learned his name from the news. Henry arrived, not in a wheelchair, but leaning on James's arm, his denim jacket freshly pressed, the faint outline of his name tag catching the sunlight. His boots were polished, a task he'd done himself that morning, his hands steady despite their age. The crowd stood, not out of duty, but out of something deeper, a recognition that respect, when earned, spreads like wildfire. Henry nodded, his eyes scanning the faces, some familiar, some new. He saw Clara, who smiled shyly. He saw the teenage skateboarder, now wearing a clean shirt, standing with his mother. He saw the veterans, their line longer now, stretching from the stage to the street. The mayor spoke briefly, his speech rehearsed, but sincere. He stumbled over a few words, but no one minded. It was James's words that lingered. He stepped to the mic, his uniform crisp, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "My father never raised his voice. He never demanded respect. He just lived it every day, through wars and losses and years of being unseen." He turned to Henry, his eyes glassy. "You showed me what a man is, Dad. You showed me strength isn't loud, it's steady. And now they see it too." Henry raised a hand, steady and deliberate, his fingers curling in a gesture that was part wave, part salute. The applause lasted 5 minutes, not for medals or drama, but for every quiet sacrifice no one had noticed until now. As the band played, Henry sat quietly, his cane across his lap. He watched a group of children run through the square, one tying a yellow ribbon to a tree, another leaving a daisy on the stage. He thought of Emily, his granddaughter, and the card he'd mailed despite its crumpled edges. She'd called that morning, her voice bright but fierce. "I'm proud of you, Grandpa. Always have been." He'd smiled, his first real smile in days, and told her to focus on her studies. But her words stayed with him, a reminder that his story wasn't just his. It belonged to those he'd loved, those he'd fought for. Days later, a letter arrived at Henry's small ranch house, its white paint peeling, but its porch swept clean. The envelope was plain, the handwriting uneven, no return address. Inside, 6 words. "I'm sorry. Can we talk?" It was from Travis. Henry could have ignored it. No one would have blamed him. The shove, the slap, the laughter. They were scars as real as any from Vietnam. but something in the shaky script reminded him of a young Marine he'd mentored in 1972, angry and lost but not beyond saving. A boy who'd come back from the edge because someone gave him a chance. Henry asked James to arrange a meeting before Travis's court date. Somewhere quiet, no spectacle. In a community center room, its walls lined with children's drawings and flyers for bingo night, Travis sat across from Henry. His hoodie was gone, replaced by a plain gray shirt, its sleeves rolled up. He looked smaller, his hands fidgeting, his eyes red from lack of sleep or tears. "I didn't know you were—" "You," he mumbled, staring at the table. Henry leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm, the same tone he'd used with frightened recruits. "That's the problem, son. You didn't ask who I was. You didn't care." Travis swallowed, his throat tight. "My brother was in the army. Died in Iraq, 2011. I was 12. Blamed everyone. Soldiers, the government, the whole damn system. Took it out on you." Henry nodded, his eyes steady. "I buried friends, too. Men who never came home. Doesn't give you the right to bury the living." There was no lecture, no anger, just truth laid bare. Travis slid a paper across the table, a volunteer form for the local VA hospital, his name scrawled at the top. "I'm starting this. And therapy, twice a week. I want to make it right." Henry studied the form, then looked at Travis, seeing not the boy who'd struck him, but the man he might become. He placed a hand on Travis's, its calluses rough but warm. "It's a long road, son. Show up every day, and you'll get there." Travis nodded, tears running freely now, no longer hidden behind bravado. He wiped his face with his sleeve, his voice barely a whisper. "My brother. He'd be ashamed of me." Henry shook his head. "He'd want you to keep going. So do I." That meeting never hit the news, but it reshaped 2 lives in that quiet room, its fluorescent lights humming softly overhead. Henry left with a lighter heart, Travis with a purpose he hadn't known he needed. 6 months later, Main Street had changed. A bronze plaque stood outside Millie's diner, its words etched deep. For Henry Callahan, a quiet hero who stood tall. The lot behind the hardware store was now Callahan Park, its grass trimmed, its benches new, a place where families gathered on weekends. On Memorial Day, a group of students from Willow Creek High left flowers at the plaque, their teacher reading Henry's story aloud. A local artist painted Henry's silhouette into a mural on the library wall, his cane and jacket unmistakable among images of farmers, teachers, and firefighters, community heroes who'd shaped the town. Henry still walked to the diner on Thursdays, same boots, same jacket, his steps slow but steady. But now, someone always waved. The barista, a girl named Sophie, offered free coffee, slipping an extra Danish onto his plate. A young Marine, home on leave, stopped to shake his hand, his grip firm, his eyes bright with admiration. A father pointed Henry out to his son, not as a legend, but as an example. "That's Mr. Callahan. He fought for us before you were born." Henry nodded, never lingering on the attention, but the warmth stayed with him, like a fire kindled after years of cold. Travis volunteered at the VA, driving veterans to appointments, his Mustang now parked neatly, its rims less flashy in the morning light. He and Henry didn't talk much, but their nods carried weight. 2 men, different paths, same direction. Sometimes Henry saw him at the diner, helping a frail vet into a booth or carrying groceries for a widow. They never made a show of it, just exchanged glances, warriors in their own way, one at the end of his road, the other just beginning. James visited once more, sitting with Henry in Callahan Park. The air was warm now, summer creeping in, the oak tree casting dappled shadows. They watched a girl tie a ribbon to a bench, her laughter bright. "You changed this town, Dad," James said, his voice low. Henry watched the girl, her ribbon fluttering in the breeze. Maybe. Or maybe they just remembered what counts. He paused, his hand resting on his cane. Took a while, but they remembered. As dusk settled, the faint hum of a helicopter lingered in memory. Not in the sky, but in the quiet shift of a town that learned to stand for one man who never asked to be seen. Willow Creek wasn't perfect. Arguments still flared, apathy still crept in. But it was different. A plaque, a park, a nod from a stranger. Small acts that carried the weight of respect, earned not through noise, but through silence, through standing tall when no one else would. If respect is earned in the quiet moments, if some heroes never fade, this story proves it. Share it. Honor it. Because the quiet ones, they're the ones who move the world.